everyone. Welcome to the Lies We Left podcast, a sister's journey through trauma. I'm Ashley, and I'm here with my three sisters, and we are going to talk about our lives so far and the trauma that we have all experienced growing up. Just as a quick disclaimer, we are not mental health professionals. We're not here as professionals talking about our trauma in any fashion or way at all. We are just here to tell y'all our story and hope that y'all can take something from it and know that you're not alone. Just a couple of quick things that a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are really difficult. It might be triggering. It might be really hard to hear. So just please keep that in mind whenever you're listening today. This is for a mature audience. So please keep that in mind. Maybe it wouldn't be best to have children listening to this. Totally up to your discretion though. So I'll go ahead and introduce my sisters. Again, I'm Ashley.
I'm Erin.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Brooke.
And we are the four sisters who have been through childhood trauma.
And just a super quick recap of our last episode, we really just kind of started diving into the things that we experienced growing up, talking about the lies that we experienced, the things that we were taught. And in this episode, we're really going to dive into what brought us to this point.
Yeah, so I'm Erin. And I guess the story kind of starts back in, I don't know, what year was it? Was it 2000?
I think it was 2019.
It was 2019.
Yeah.
Okay, so right before the coronavirus hit the United States. So that was also a fun thing to go through. So I started going to therapy in, I think, June. Yeah, June 2019.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, wait, what brought you to therapy, though? Like, why did you start going to therapy again?
So I have had like a whole slew of health issues. I had implants and got really sick from those. And then let's see, what was it? I got rid of my implants. I explanted. And I was seeing this really expensive doctor, and we were still trying to figure out some things that was going on with me. And she brought up the idea that I might have a brain
injury.
A brain injury.
Yeah, because you had texted all of us saying, guys, do you remember when growing up, and this is Brooke, do you remember growing up, was I ever dropped on my head? Or did I have a major head injury? And I was like, no, that happened to me. I fell out of the car. And you were like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You did? And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah, so my doctor wanted to see if I had ever fallen or anything like that, because she did a brain map of me and just things weren't adding up. Things weren't working the way that they should. Things were, I guess, blacked out where they shouldn't be. I honestly couldn't tell you, but it didn't look good, and so she wanted to see if I had suffered a brain injury. So fast forward a few months later, I start having really bad issues sleeping. Now I've always had issues sleeping, but it was very interesting. I couldn't sleep in the room with my husband. If he was in the room, I suddenly became very anxious and fearful, and my husband has never hurt me or anything like that. I had to be in a room by myself at night, even if my kids if they wanted to sleep in our bed or whatever, I couldn't sleep in the room next to them. Any type of movement startled me. And for people who don't know, there's something called adrenal fatigue, and it's where your adrenals are just exhausted and you're always in that fight or flight. I don't know, what is it called? Flight or flight response?
Yeah.
So I've always had that, but this was different. It's like I couldn't be in a room at night with another person. So I started going to therapy to address why I couldn't sleep at night if someone was in a room with me.
Well, and there's all sorts of therapy. What specific therapy
were
you going to?
Yeah, so I've done talk therapy before, and that didn't really do anything for me. So I looked into something called EMDR. And what does EMDR stand for? Eye movement decent.
We'll get that in our resources.
But
listeners.
It's EMDR, but it was trauma therapy.
It was trauma therapy, but it was a therapist who specialized in EMDR. I'm looking up what EMDR means. But here, you look it up to see what it means. But so I started going to this therapist, and you know, the first time you meet your therapist, you have to give the whole spiel about what happened to you and all that. And I remember one of the first things I said was, I have never been sexually assaulted. I was confident of that. I was confident of a lot of other things that have happened in my life, but I was for certain that I have never been abused in that way. So months go by from June 2019 to, I guess, October 2019, and we're getting more into the EMDR. And did you find out what that stands for?
Yeah, it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy.
Okay, all right. So I started doing that, and for anyone who doesn't know what EMDR is, I think that there are a few different ways to do it, but the way that I did it is I held these like two pulsars in my hands that would go off at different intensities, different times, and so it kind of tricks your brain into not whatever habits your brain has formed
to fight or flight.
Yeah, to fight or flight. It's
restructuring your brain.
It's restructuring your brain in order for you to get a memory out.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I came to the realization that I was molested by one of my friend's brothers, older brothers. And during that session, I saw and I felt red fingernails going inside me. And it was very disgusting feeling. The whole thing was just a very interesting experience, and I felt very shameful. I felt very disgusting, but I didn't know how to process that. And I think I told my husband first about it, but then I told Ashley first. And we were driving in a car, and then Ashley, you told me something that was pretty shocking.
Yeah, I mean, Erin, I don't know how we got on the topic. It seems like forever ago now, but Erin had got on the topic of what had happened to her, and at that point, I had shared something with her that I didn't quite believe. I just told her that it's kind of a weird memory that I had, that, you know, I wasn't sure how to process it, and that I buried it. In 2016, I started working for CPS in Austin, and, you know, whenever you're doing the training for CPS, they require you to take all kinds of training about abuse or neglect and stuff like that, and I had to take this very intense sexual abuse course, and it was like an all-day thing, and I don't quite remember what specifically came up in the video, but all I know is that I was sitting, and I can recall exactly where I was sitting, and I was watching this video, and I immediately just started having this like really bad panic attack because I had this memory that I didn't know was a memory at the time. It just inserted into my head. It was almost as if a microchip or like a USB was put into my brain and was feeding me information that I did not have yet. It was a very weird experience. So I freaked out. I immediately excused myself from this training, and I went into the bathroom, and I panicked more. And then on my way home, I was shaking. I could barely drive, and I had told my husband about it, and I had convinced him that this was not real. And that...
What was it?
Oh, are we giving specific details?
Yeah. Well, I mean, share what you want, but what was the memory?
There was this... It was totally random, like I said, you know, and it was being triggered, you know, looking back. But I had this memory of being in the shower with... our mother at the time, and I was being touched, and I was made to touch her, and I don't know how to explain. It was the weirdest thing to have a memory that you didn't know you had.
How old were you in that memory?
At the time, I didn't know how old I was, but looking back and doing work, EMDR therapy and stuff like that, I was like 7 or 8. I was definitely older. I wasn't like super young. So then at that point, I buried it for 4 years. And I told no one else.
3. Right? No.
It was 2016.
I don't know. I have childhood trauma, so I struggle with math.
Yeah, I guess it was 3. Yeah, so I buried it for 3 years. I didn't tell anybody else. I didn't tell anybody else about it. I'd only told Colin, and I left it at that. And then, so this moment when Erin is opening up to me, telling me her story, I had told her what I had remembered about this memory. And of course, I'm not calling it a memory at this point. I'm like convincing Erin. I think some of my specific words at the time when I was telling her about this is, I don't think it's anything though. I think that, I don't know where I got this from, but I don't think that ever happened to me. I think it's nothing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I remember being just angry. I remember just being angry, not at you, but because you're not the type of person that makes up stuff. Like, you've always been pretty level-headed. I think out of all of us, I would say Rachel and Ashley are the most level-headed out of all of us. And so...
Well, they don't exaggerate.
Yeah, they don't.
You and I definitely go more on our feelings in the moment.
Yeah, we do. This is... Yeah, so when, you're telling me this, I'm just like, what the freaking hell? Like, I didn't know what the hell to do with it, and then you told me not to tell anyone.
I did.
And I was just like, what the hell do I do with that?
Yeah, and I didn't expect you. The thing is that I did not expect you to react in the way that you did, because I was damn sure trying to convince myself that it was not real.
You were. And I remember just thinking, how does she not think this is real? Like, you don't just... A sane person just doesn't say, yeah, I was molested by my mother. Like, who wants to say that?
Well, the thing is that I was twisting the memory is what was happening. Whenever I was telling Erin about this story, I was telling her that, I think maybe she was just trying to help wash me. That's what I chalked it up to be. But that's not, but Erin read between the lines and she saw what I was telling her.
Yeah, so with that information, I just didn't know what to do. I was so burdened by it. And
so we're in the car.
Well, so
somewhere.
Yeah, so I tell my husband, actually.
Oh, you did tell Travis?
I told Travis.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Great secret keeper, Erin.
No, looking back, yeah, I was not kept a secret.
To be fair, it took a few days for me to tell him. But I mean, I was just thinking, this person is around my children.
Yeah.
I have 3 boys. And I was just like, what the heck? So I told Travis, my husband, and he was just like, what? And she thinks it didn't happen? And she's like, he said, Erin, you have to tell your sisters. You have to.
Yeah.
It's like, Ashley told me not to tell anyone. I can't tell anyone. She's like, Erin, you have to tell. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And so... Eventually, within time, Brooke and I...
How long did you wait to tell me?
It was in early November, right?
No, it had to... Well...
I think it was in early November.
Right.
It had to... Yeah.
So we were having a family get-together, and Erin and I were in the car.
No, you just came over. So I guess that is a family get-together. We were hanging out
for
whatever reason.
Out, and we were going to run an errand, but then because when... There's 2 conversations we had. The first conversation Erin had in the car with me. She's driving. We're on that loop around to go around to your house. And you give me a hypothetical saying, well, I have a friend and she has these memories. And so you made it a hypothetical using Mom and Ashley. And I thought it was a different childhood friend. And you just were, not telling me. And it made me angry. I was like, no, she absolutely needs to tell. Like, this person has grandkids? No, you can't let people like that around kids. Are you kidding me? And then I think it was a week later where I'm spending the weekend with you or something, and we're driving in the car to pick up the boys from school, your boys.
Yeah.
And you drop your bombshell and Ashley's bombshell, and the look on your face, because we're at a stoplight or something, and my face, I don't remember what my face did, but you just looked at me and you said, are you okay? And I said, I've had these visions of this for years, like from a little girl. I remember stuff like this happening. I remember, but I thought it was like some demonic dream that I just kept reliving. I never thought that it was real. So my experience and my memories are being laid down on a bed and her spreading my legs apart and fingering me and putting her mouth down there on me and rubbing Dustin on me and being in the bathtub and her putting her fingers deep inside me. Like, and at that moment, it's like I see all these flashes and I look at our education and the things that are missing in our life, and I'm like, and I think I cursed. I was like, oh my God, shit, Aaron, shit. And I was like, what do we do? And I was just beyond angry. I think I was trembling.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what to do at that point.
And so Brooke and I, and I remember telling you, Brooke, I was very dismissive of this, but I was like, I didn't ever tell y'all, because at that point in time, had I already told y'all about me being molested by...
Yeah, because that's what kept us talking, is because I had already been through sexual abuse trauma counseling. So you and I were talking a lot about your friend molesting you.
My friend's brother.
Yeah, your friend's brother.
So I remember, so I didn't tell y'all about the red fingernails because I was so disturbed by those red fingernails. And just so everyone can know, our birth mother had always had red fingernails.
Yeah.
She had red fingernails all the time.
Yeah.
So I remember telling you kind of in a dismissive way, I had like this vision kind of during EMDR of these red fingernails being inside of me, but I don't know if that means anything. I was just very dismissive of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you and I come up with this amazing plan to...
No, even before that. No, before that. The timeline happened, then it was Thanksgiving, and she was invited because she was family.
Well, hold on. So,
okay.
So you and I came up with this amazing plan.
Yeah.
That we would
get Ashley to talk about it.
Yes, that we would get Ashley to talk about it.
Because she was in denial, and she's glaring at us right now.
But we really, I didn't know how to approach it. I saw how Ashley almost just didn't want to believe this, maybe.
She was in denial.
She was in denial, and I just felt so bad for her that she had kept this a secret, or that she had shoved this down for 3 years. So, good job at keeping a secret, Ashley.
And I think there was an urgency on our part because, Rachel had kids. Those are my nieces and nephews.
Oh, and Thanksgiving was coming up soon.
Yeah, so we were all on pins and needles, and we were like, we need to discuss this. This cannot be a family secret. We just never discuss.
Yeah, so you end up going to Ashley's house to...
tell her that
that you needed to talk, and then you say,
I tell Ashley about those visions or demonic dreams or whatever they were, which now I know to be real. I just was asking her from a standpoint, hey, from a CPS standpoint, how do you know what is a dream versus reality? And she said, why? And I said, well, because... here's what it is. And her face did not change. Ashley's face just stayed blank. And she was like, well, shit. And she was like, well, I'm got to tell you something, sister. No joke. That's what she said. Mm-hmm. And that's when she told me. And then we had planned it for Aaron. I had texted Aaron.
We aren't great manipulators. Well, actually, I think we're okay at that. But yeah, deceivers.
I think I was pretty vocal about how pissed that made me.
I know.
Like, that made me really angry that...
So Aaron dropped by, as Ashley and I...
Yeah, so happened to bring something to her door. But yeah, sorry, Ashley. So then we all decide that we need to tell Rachel.
But Rachel is out of state right now. Yeah, you went
to Massachusetts. To Boston, I think.
Oh, that's right. I forgot I was in Boston at that time.
Yeah, you were in Boston.
Oh, wow.
So we're looking at your new house, Brooke.
Yeah.
So after that is when we tell...
We're all sitting in the car.
Well, and we need to let Rachel tell what she remembers from when we told her. And
so we all looked at the house that my husband, Stephen, and I had bought, and it's being built, and we went to look at one of the model homes so we could show them. And then we all know that, like Ashley, Aaron, and I know we're going to talk to Rachel and tell her what we've discovered. And so we're all sitting in the back of Ashley's car, and Rachel, what do you remember that conversation being? Like...
To be honest, I've kind of blocked a lot of it out.
Really?
Because it was so hard to hear three of your sisters say that, in one way or another,
Did you believe us? It's okay to say if you didn't.
So I had placed myself in a mental state because, and somehow we just figured out that I've been in therapy the longest. I had made restitution with the fact that Mom was physically abusive, as was Dad. I made restitution with the fact that she was emotionally abusive, as was my dad, and that there was spiritual abuse involved. I could get, I could wrap my head around those topics, and I dealt with them because of years of therapy. And listening to their story was it was absolutely heartbreaking. And almost from the beginning, I started thinking, am I included in this picture? Is this something that happened to me? And I don't have a lot of memories from the past because pretty much a lot of my childhood was spent with me being very insecure and very fearful of my parents. And so I don't really have a lot of memories. And the ones that I don't have, or the ones that I do have, they're not very detailed. And even those aren't very good. So I don't really focus very much on my past. But when they told me, it was just heartbreaking. But when I got in my car after they had told me, and I don't know what my response was to you guys, other than
Your face was stunned.
I remember saying that I was really, really sorry. And I remember them, because they had been dealing with this topic mentally on and off for over a month. By the time you guys got to me, you had so many questions for me, and I was just kind of dazed and confused. I have to kind of go away and kind of simmer in my thoughts, and I have to think about it a little bit before, and as soon as I got in the car by myself to go back to my house, it just kind of started making sense. Well, why wouldn't that be another area of abuse that we all went through? Why not that, why would it only be physical, spiritual, mental, emotional abuse and not sexual abuse? Why? Where do evil parents at the time, where do they draw the line?
Yeah.
Especially if they're drunk, if they're high. Who's to say?
She was drunk and high all the time.
Yeah, she was a closet alcoholic and closet abuser of her prescription drugs.
So we all sit in the car that day, we discuss it, and then here we are at Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so Travis was really upset that he was like, we aren't going to Thanksgiving. And I was like, Travis, because we had all talked about it, and Ashley pretty much took the stance of, we're not going to handle this. We're not going to deal with this because I don't even know if it happened. We're going to shove this in the closet. And I think me and Brooke were very much like, no, we can't shove this in a closet. Like, I have children that I have to protect.
Well, and at this point, like, I had told Steven, and his face just dropped. And he was like, Brooke, you guys can't throw this around. Like, you have to be 100% sure.
Yeah.
And I was like, baby, look at the evidence. Like, it makes sense. Look at our lives, how we've struggled in all these different areas of emotional intimacy, of this, and I gave him, and he goes, no, I see what you're talking about. I believe you, but baby, you've got to be so sure, because this can't go unnoticed. We have to handle this.
Yeah.
So from my perspective during this whole time, Brooke and Aaron kind of took a stance, and then me and Rachel kind of took a different stance, because I think I was believing what Aaron and Brooke were saying, but for me, I wasn't 100% sure that that's what it actually was. And so, prior to any of this, prior to me even having my memory back in 2016, I never had a relationship with our mother. I never did. Like, even before that, I literally could give two shits whether I saw her again or not. I didn't really care, so I was honestly fine.
And honestly, out of all the girls, out of all her daughters, she picked on Ashley the most. She was incredibly mean, to the point of beating Ashley. Our dad's funeral, she told Ashley, I don't even know why you're crying. You weren't even that close to him. So
she said that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, damn.
The day of Dad's funeral. Like his memorial. And
yeah,
I took up for Ashley, called her, and she was like, are you mad at me, honey?
I can't make that up. That is word for word.
And
what
I was
she
like,
said.
yeah, I'm mad at you. Why would you tell my little sister who's grieving her best friend, her daddy, that Rachel's looking at me shocked. You didn't know this?
I did not know that. My God, I would have chewed her ass off.
And I was like, how dare you? And she was like, I didn't say that. Well, her husband...
it sounds exactly like something my mom would say.
And her husband, she remarried. So her husband hears the conversation. He goes, yes, you did say that. I was standing right there.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like, also, from my childhood, this is Aaron, because Ashley and I apparently sound a lot alike. I don't know. From what we've been told. So, growing up, like, I never liked our mother.
No, never.
I never liked her. And I always was told that I was just rebellious. That I didn't like authority figures, that I was just rebellious and all this, but I don't remember ever liking her.
No.
Even...
Like, I tolerated her, but I never liked her.
She was scary.
Oh, yeah.
She was scary.
You nenever knew what was going to happen.
But even as a baby, you did not like her.
Oh, yeah. I wanted someone else...
That lived with us.
Yeah. I wanted her to always hold me.
You wanted Rachel, you wanted me, but anyway...
So kind of going back to, like, this whole story of where everything came out, me and Rachel really... in my opinion, we took a different stance, and Rachel can tell her perspective, but because I was so unsure, I was like, I mean, I don't really care if she comes to family events anymore, just because I don't have a relationship with her, but I'm not going to confront her on something that I'm not 100% sure happened. So at this point, it kind of caused some family conflict, because we were taking different stances, and
the conflict didn't happen. Mom came to Thanksgiving because Mom grabbed one of Aaron's son's face, and she was just being stupid. She wasn't being mean or anything, but she grabbed his face and smushed it. And the anger that, like, I was standing there, I was so angry, and I just wanted to be like, you C-word, get your hands off my nephew. Like, there was so much anger. And I went to Aaron the day after, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't. I have anxiety. I'm having panic attacks. I don't want her anywhere near my nephews or nieces. I cannot do this.
Yeah, so we made it through Thanksgiving, and then I remember it was so we get together as sisters for each of our birthdays, and we got together for my birthday, which was in December.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know, it's December 11th, so the second week of December? So Christmas is 2 weeks away. And Brooke and I pretty much take the stance of like she can't be around. And that's, I think, when the conflict started, because Rachel and Ashley were like, no, like or not sweeping it under the rug, but like it's just too soon or whatever. We don't have all of our facts. I don't know, Rachel, what were you thinking at that time?
That honestly was where I was coming from. Like I said earlier, I take time to process things. Like I mull over things, and maybe I'm special mentally, meaning I'm slow, but I take my time with things like this. And my perspective was supposedly that person, the perpetrator, is going to AA. They are sober. This isn't something that's a constant threat or a current threat. Taking that stance was probably the wrong thing to do, because it showed my sisters that I possibly didn't believe them, which was never the case. Never the case at all. I totally believed them. In fact, from the beginning, I started to think about all of the facts, and I really truly believed that my dad knew what was happening as well when it was going on. I really truly believed that. I didn't tell that to them, but when I started piecing everything together, I just kind of assumed that this was something that I needed to work through again. And this was just something that we're going to move from this point. But it needed, and I didn't understand and really realize that what they needed was complete cutoff in order to deal with closure, which is fine. I just didn't really truly understand that, just because I was still thinking, oh, we're going to be moving towards reconciliation, which was dumb and naive on my part, because reconciliation is not in that person's vocabulary. There isn't ever a real apology. If there is an apology, it's also laced with everything that you've done wrong.
Or somebody else.
Or somebody else that made her do it. So there would be no reconciliation. There is no going back from this.
I have a question for you before we continue, because I don't want to miss it. What are these pieces that you're saying that you were piecing together? I'm just curious from your perspective.
So, okay, you're high all the time, you're drunk all the time. What does your spouse say to that? How does your spouse reconcile that he comes home and, whatever is going on? Your kids are eating raw bacon out of the refrigerator because they're hungry and their mom's too stoned to fucking do anything about it. Yeah. Things like that. How do you piece, which from the beginning made me realize Dad was in on this. Like, he wasn't maybe in on the actual perpetration and the abuse, but he absolutely knew that it was going on.
Well, and so when this is all happening and us as sisters were discussing all this, Stephen had the same kind of premonition that you did, and he thinks that my mom actually gave me to the man when I was 3 to get drugs or to get prescription pills.
Which again makes sense.
And it makes sense because I confided, I didn't tell you guys, but I confided in his mother, my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. I went to her and I said, this is what's going on, because she had been in the hospital. And I'm just grasping at straws. And I didn't tell her about the abuse. What I said was, do you remember anything about my mom in the church growing up? Like, when did the alcoholism and the pill popping, and my mother-in-law is a very open person. She'll tell you, anything.
Yeah.
And she just spilled her guts. She said when she first came to the church that 2 women in particular, and you girls know who I'm talking about, the 2 hierarchy Jezebels of the church.
Yeah.
Told her, well, Cindy is going to ask you for pills, so make sure you don't give them to her because she has a problem.
Wow.
So that right there. And then at this time, I've now started EMDR therapy, the same therapist that Erin is seeing. So it's now December.
Well, so I think I started seeing the therapist before you did.
Yeah, so we're all seeing the same therapist,
Yeah.
and this is December, and then it's turning into Christmas, and we're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
What do
Hold
we do
on.
about Christmas?
I didn't start my therapy until March of 2020.
No, because the recording, when we actually confronted our mother, I still have that recording on voice memos.
No, I know that. I didn't start doing my therapy, though, until
Yeah,
that
she didn't
year.
start until later.
Yeah, I didn't start until later.
I don't think that timeline's right, because the day after, I emailed it to our therapist. Anyway.
Anyways.
Another thing that I really had to reconcile with that may not make sense is, to my knowledge, this is Rachel, by the way, sorry. I don't have any recollection of that type of abuse. I also don't have a whole lot of memories otherwise. But I guess it needs to be said, like, the reason that I might believe that it might not have happened to me was, as a kid, I was incredibly, incredibly sick. I had eczema and psoriasis, and I lived in a very moldy old house. I would scratch myself until my skin bled at night. I'd have to wear socks on my arms to keep myself from scratching. I always had level 3 impetigo-induced rashes. Life was very, very difficult for me physically growing up. I was very restricted on what I could and couldn't eat because of allergies. And I was always sick, basically. So, of course, one of the first questions that I asked myself is, why not me? Why don't I remember this? Why didn't anything happen? And then I kind of started thinking about it more in depth. And what I've kind of realized is that I was too sick, and I was in pain and sick all the time, to the extent maybe that didn't make me seem as much of a target, maybe an open target, as did my other sisters. And that was some extra guilt that I had to deal with and reconcile with. But there was a point where you guys came to me and were like, okay, basically in a text message, they were like, okay, are you serious about this or not? Do you believe us or not? And it was like, okay, I'm not handling this the right way, clearly. And, from there, it was like, okay, so this is, and from that, having whoever, I don't even remember who texted me, but that somebody texted me in a group text, and it was basically like, Rachel, are you on board with this or are you not on board with this? And that wasn't ever a question. Of course, I believe them. Nobody makes up stuff like that. Why would you make up something like that? My mom had the corner on being morbid, on being weird, on being...
She was very promiscuous. I don't know if y'all remember any memories, but I do. I have very specific memories.
There was absolutely...
Well, Ashley found lesbian porn on her computer.
There was enough...
there was
enough weirdness, there was enough abuse to justify anything like that. So that there was never a question in my mind of whether it's real or not.
So, and there's a part in all this where, like, as it's happening, I'm angry, I'm confused, but then the logic starts to take over because I'm an analyzer, and I'm like, wait a minute, let's go back to what I know. What I know is Mom told me growing up, she was raped by her grandfather, she was raped by her own uncle. Her mom said she
a neighbor.
No,
she wasn't raped by her grandfather. It was her father.
Her father.
Her father.
No,
and by her
she
grandfather.
told me. She told me
That's what
that
she told me
that she
as
was
well.
made to sit in the lap of her grandfather while her father played with her.
Oh shit.
So
She told me her grandfather as well. I've heard that and her father.
And she said her mother gave her up. Like, she never lived with her mom till she was later in her teens. So I'm in my mind analyzing, okay, Mom already acts like a kid.
And she always has a problem with men.
Yeah.
I remember
Like,
that.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
She's always had a problem with men.
She did.
Yeah, always had a problem with men.
Well, so I'm analyzing it and I'm like, okay, let's think about this. Maybe this is her when because we already know what happens when you mix alcohol and drugs to someone who has unresolved trauma. You act those things out. So in my mind, I was like, maybe this was Mom being drunk and high, because I just can't wrap my mind around how a mother would do that to her own child. Like, it's just, it's the most evil thing you can't even imagine. So I think what happened is she was drunk and high, and she resorted back to the however old she was, doing this to her own children.
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's what got me through with the therapy, like in getting started. But then the longer it went, I didn't get true peace until we confronted her, honestly.
So it's still December. It's a few days before Christmas. And Travis and I think you and Steven take a stance, and we say we can't come to Christmas.
And I think that's when you texted me about whether I believed you or not. And at that time, you know, my partner and I, we were
because y'all were the closest to our mom. I mean, close as one can get to her.
Well, because you were always doing stuff.
Pickles on a peanut butter sandwich are. Yeah,
well,
sure.
I mean, you had her over at your house. We never had her over at our house.
We never had her over.
We worked. We worked on that relationship, and because of the lack of relationships that I was allowed to have, grandparents and grandparental involvement was always something that was really important for me to have with my two kiddos. But when that text was approached, like, we don't believe them, my partner was like, okay, so this is going in a different direction, and I don't even need to tell you what your job is. What, you know, how do you handle this? He was basically just saying, okay, we're going in a different direction, and they're the ones who get to call what direction we go in. Absolutely. I completely agree. You know, and so the consensus, if I'm wrong, was, correct me if I'm wrong, the consensus after the end of that text message was, okay, we're going to do Christmas as a family without Mom. We're going to tell her she is not invited. And after Christmas, we're going to have an event. An event makes it sound like a party. It was anything but. We're going to have a moment where they confront my mom on this stuff.
Yeah.
And address the issues.
So I remember it came to Rachel, your son's birthday. So that was in February. Yeah. And you invited all of us to the birthday party, and I think it was Brooke who said, well, is she invited, our mom? And you said yes. And then your husband kind of went off on all of...
No, I said, I'm sorry, I want to be there for my nephew, but I just can't. I can't see that woman without getting nauseous, and I'll throw up. I can't.
So
I can't do it.
then your husband, our brother-in-law, sends us all a text message and saying that, you know, we need to get our stuff together. And and we can't, I don't know, what did he say? I can't remember, but he was just like, it's my son's birthday, and if you want to
make it about you or something like that.
Something like that, and if you want to if you don't want her to come, then you uninvite her. And I stewed over it. I cried over that text message for like a long time, because your husband's always been just a huge protector, in my opinion. He was my first brother. I felt, and so I just felt like he doesn't even believe us. Like, and that wasn't what it was, but that's how I felt. And so I sent him a long text message just saying, you know, if your daughter or your son had said that they were molested, would you have confronted them the way that you did us? You wouldn't have. And I believe that if you truly believe us, then you wouldn't have said what you just said. So then we had a family meeting, and that's where Brooke and I really shared.
I was working.
Yeah, Ashley had to work, but we just shared everything. And then I think that might have been when it changed.
I mean, it was...
Can I back up really quick? So there was also, this huge family get-together that we had to confront, like, basically talk it all out. Prior to that, all three of my sisters came to my house, and my husband was there.
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that was my birthday.
That's the day Aaron and I got mad and we
left.
Okay.
That was my birthday.
Like,
Thanks,
we
y'all.
went straight to Travis in the machine shop. We were like, what the heck? How can nobody... Well, I don't get this. What is going on? Our family... And I just felt so like we were losing our family. Like,
I think it's one thing to... It's definitely one thing, I think, if you grow up, you know, and if you just remember memories and you are 1,000% sure that they happen and you bury it.
Yeah.
And so you still remember it, but you just purposely block it out. Like, I think that is a totally different experience from just honestly from the bottom of your soul completely forgetting what happened to you, and then something triggers you and you remember everything.
Well, and I remember still at that point in time just thinking, like, being in denial. It couldn't have happened to me. Because I didn't have a full-on memory.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I couldn't smell what was in the room. I couldn't see entirely the room. So it was like, for me, it wasn't a full-on memory. And so, but what I did go off of is my younger sister does not lie. She does not lie. And she does not exaggerate the truth. And therefore, I believe her and I will stand up for her. And that's primarily what I went off of. It wasn't necessarily protecting myself. It was that I was protecting my sisters. How messed up is that? I was still just like, I don't believe myself, but I believe my sisters.
When you're conditioned from early on to understand and know that you're not worthy of anything in the eyes of the two people that are supposed to care about you most in life, you kind of tend to carry that on, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I really just have to thank y'all for pushing me, because I honestly don't think that I wanted to face any of that. Because, I mean, the thing is that prior to any of that, like, everything with both of my parents was already so shitty. And I think it was for y'all, too, in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
Like, it was already so shitty, and the only reason why our mom was coming to family functions was primarily just because it was just a habit.
It was a formality.
It was a formality, yeah. And so
but
it was just
even
something
in
that
that
happened.
formality, she made us feel like we had to wait on her hand and foot.
Yeah.
The gifts she gave us were gifts she wanted, because when we didn't want them, we just give them back to her. Like, everything was so manipulated, so calculated. She would cut Ashley down on the way Ashley would cook. She would criticize Erin on her Christmas decorations.
Oh, my lasagna.
Yeah, your lasagna.
One time she
You're
said...
not even a freaking Italian lady. You have no business telling us.
One time she said, did you use oven-ready noodles? Yes, I did. Oh. Yeah, I could tell.
I mean,
like, what the hell?
And all this, guys, all this came out after Steven and I had our wedding. At our wedding, I already knew, like, years ago, I didn't have a mom growing up. So
we raised each other.
We raised each other, but I got a spiritual mentor, Martha. She kind of adopted me. From, like, Martha and I have known each other for 8 years now, and I wanted Martha to be honored as my mother, walking down the aisle. But I knew it would cause a rift with my own mom, so I made it to where both of them could walk down the aisle. And Mom was incredibly mad. She, made a big deal about it. She was upset that I didn't want a picture with her alone, but I wanted one with Martha. And I was like, Mom, I'm sorry, but you're not a mom. You were never... I mean, I forgive you. There's no bitterness, but...
What's going to be real fun is when we have an entire episode designated to the conversation that we had with her when we confronted her.
Yeah. Because we confronted her in what? February?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we confronted her in February.
And that really does need its own, episode.
Which is what we're going to do, yeah. But from that point on towards my son's birthday... my partner and I, our stance became, okay, we're handling this differently.
Your husband.
Yeah, can you say husband? Because partner sounds like your wife.
What? Well, is that why he looks at me when I call him
yes,
that?
Yes, Rachel.
That's, yeah.
So, okay, I'm sorry. I love the LGBTQ community. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Is that really what
seriously.
He has glared at me every time I said that.
No, I think you say partner when you're not married to the person, but you're
that's
with
what
the
I've
person.
heard. Yeah.
Regardless.
Really?
Yeah.
See, to me, I don't like the name spouse. I don't like the word spouse. It's always creeped.
Well, you're married to
It
one.
makes my it makes my skin crawl. Spouse makes my skin crawl. And so partner makes me feel like there are two people attacking the world. So I've always...
Well, I don't think he thinks of it that
No,
way.
apparently not. That's hilarious. That's why he gives me that look whenever I say that.
I can't believe he hasn't told you that.
Why didn't you ever ask him when he gives you that look?
You know, Terry. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't told me. That's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, partner sounds more personal to me than spouse. Anyway, so at that point, our new mission was to support Brooke and Ashley and Aaron at that point, because at that point it was an issue that was going to be addressed. This wasn't an ideal time, but there's never an ideal time to do this. But I mean, I have to be there for my sisters. And so, and of course I'm going to be, which is kind of my fault in a sense, because I'm the one who started going to therapy first. And of course, how many times did I tell you guys we all need to be in therapy?
Oh, you got us books.
Yeah, I would get them books. I would give them podcasts to listen to. I would tell them, oh, you got to listen to this TED Talk. Brene
Brown is the best.
Yes.
She really is. If you're
She
listening
really
to this-
is the best.
If you're listening to this, Brene Brown, I love you. And
We would love to have you
Yes.
as a
Oh my
guest.
gosh. I still have fantasies that Brene Brown is going to adopt me, even though we're like 10 years apart in age. I'm just like, she needs to be my new mother. But at that point, we kind of shifted as a family to being, okay, so this is an issue that we're going to deal with as a family unit. And we're going to deal with the issue together.
But even as we were talking about, having to deal with it and confront her, Aaron, it angered me so much because Aaron was stuck in this, and this is how we grew up. This is a testament of what was fed into us, the Kool-Aid that we were fed. She was like, no,
A
you
lie
can't.
that we left.
Yes, a lie that we forever left. Aaron kept saying, but if we do this, that's not honoring our father and mother.
Uh-huh.
Wait,
And
what's that Bible scripture?
honor your father and mother. So you something.
Oh, so that your days may be long and full
yeah.
or something
And
like
Erin
that?
told me, she was like, what if I confront her and one day my boys reject me and do to me?
Yeah.
What if they never
That
want
was a deep fear of mine.
Same here.
And I told you, well, because I had reached out to my pastor and he was like, oh no, Satan is a liar. Like, no, he actually said the devil is a liar. And he goes, you tell your sister this, when honor is gone, or when trust is broken, honor is gone. And he goes, that needs to be dealt with. People like that don't change. You get that woman out of your life.
Yeah, and I think that gave me a lot of freedom because that was a lie that we left. Honor your fucking mother and father. No matter what, they're right, you're wrong. And that's how I grew up thinking.
Well,
and
it's so crazy because I went to my father-in-law and I told him, what had happened. Because this is huge. And I was like grasping, could this not have happened? And he asked how we were doing. And I said, well, we're about to confront, our mom and we're going to end the relationship. And he was even like, I don't think God's going to, be careful. You shouldn't really do, like, where the F?
Yeah.
You put your hands on your child's genitalia, but you're supposed to still have, like, I couldn't believe the hogwash that everybody around me was saying. It was so crazy.
I think it's a huge... People who know us and even people who don't know us and get to know us for the first time, like, I think it's a huge testament that we all have been through so much and we all still are very family-oriented and we all have remained very close.
yeah.
Despite all of this, and I think it's a huge...
Well,
We also all believe in God. believe it or not.
Yeah, we do believe in God.
We are all still very much. We're still very much.
Not that there's
believers.
a problem with being an atheist.
And if you were in our past, if you were part of that group when we were younger, this isn't a tell-all. This isn't we're trying to drag people in the mud.
No.
No.
I would imagine that people are going to come to this podcast if they knew us in the past, and this is going to shock them, and it's going to break their hearts.
Well, I
Because
don't know
the
if they're
outside-
going to believe us.
No, they won't believe us.
Especially you, Brooke.
Oh, I know they won't. And I freaking don't care. I
Yeah.
could care less what anybody in that church thinks.
Well, that's neither here nor there. I think people with good motives that approach this podcast will understand the reason once they understand what we were going through, and once they understand that the family unit that they were shown as the parents were being pastors was something completely different that lived out on a daily basis in our lives.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the merciful part of me. Like, I'm pretty gung-ho standing up for people without a voice, but I can also look at it from a flip side, and of course they're not going to believe us, because if they believed us, they would have to believe that their entire lives were built on a lie. I mean, can you imagine?
Well, maybe not entire, but maybe that part of their life.
That's a big part, though, because we weren't allowed to be out in the world.
I don't think that we should make assumptions about anybody listening to this if they do know us. I think that they should just, if they take it, great. If they don't, then that's great too. But that's not going to stop us from telling our story and trying to help people.
No, it won't.
But
But I'm
when
still
you
going to
hear-
have my assumption of something.
And honestly, when you hear someone growing up, like as an adult, who was watching us grow up, what was their responsibility in all this?
Hey, and let me just share something that, working for CPS, that, believe it or not, there are hundreds, I don't know the actual number, but there are tons of families who do not believe these outcries that kids make. And that's obviously why CPS exists, is because people don't believe these children.
Here's a question for you, being a CPS caseworker. Because in the beginning when all this happened, I could not find any material about incest from a mother to a daughter. How often do you get that report?
I have never gotten a report for incest from a mother to a daughter. Now, definitely from, an uncle, dad, stepdad, grandfather. Yeah, I just had a case like that. That's very common. But anything from a mother to a daughter or a son, not talked about. It just isn't. It's really interesting. There's very little, not only, there's some research out there, but from when I've tried to look at stuff, there's very little stuff out there.
There's very little information.
Resources.
But what's funny, well, actually it's not funny, but what's interesting is my therapist, she said, you are not my first sister and my only sister group that has been molested by their mother.
Yeah.
You would be very surprised at how often this happens. But because it's a mother molesting their child, specifically their daughter, it's like there's more
There's more shame.
there's more shame to it. And not saying that when a boy is molested, that's
Right.
not as shame. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, it's just, you see a mother as the nurturer. How could she be the perpetrator? And so I think that's really why we wanted to start this podcast, is because we wanted to have at least something out there so that someone could listen to it and know that they weren't and they aren't alone.
And you're not crazy.
Yeah, you aren't crazy.
And it's not like we're creating this podcast because we're 1,000% healed and we're doing just fine and dandy. No, we're recording this as we're moving through this healing phase. And something that I've learned, like just most recently, is that I have not allowed myself to be angry. Last year was my year to grieve and my year to be sad about the things that happened to me and my sisters. But now this year, I'm just angry. And there's somebody that I see who helps me, and she just told me, just be angry, allow yourself those feelings. And it feels pretty damn good to just be angry and to say that I hate her. I've always been ashamed to say that I hate her because I thought that was a sin. I thought I'd go to hell for me hating my parent.
But what else are you supposed to feel?
I know. I denied those feelings for so long, but it feels so nice to just be honest with how I really feel about her.
And I think as Christians, especially with how we grew up, you can't be angry.
No.
Do not let the
sun go down on your wrath.
That little 80s cartoon or puppet thing, Gerbert, that's the first time I knew that you could be angry. And what did our parents do? We couldn't watch that episode.
Yeah, but so the next episode, we'll be talking about the confrontation that we had with our mother.
And then, from there, it's going to be super cool. We're going to, I think, have different segments or different episodes where we all are kind of telling our individual stories as a whole.
And then hopefully having some people from the church, from our childhood, talk.
Yeah, it'll be super cool. So tune in next time for the Lies We Left podcast, a sister's journey through trauma.
We know you can't wait.